to the Passive Income Podcast. I am your host, Dividend Dave. Please be sure to join the Passive Income Posse by clicking that subscribe button below. Super excited for today's guest. Joining me is the Money Cruncher. You can find him on X, the app formerly known as Twitter, at money_cruncher. Please go ahead and give yourself an introduction.
Hey Dave, thank you for having me. So as some of you on X know, I'm a 24 years old, immigrated to the US when I was 15. Currently work for a Fortune 200 company as a accounting data analyst. So I have that CPA and accounting background. Been really always passionate about investing, personal finance, making money, and just pursuing the American dream. And as of yesterday, my net worth is around 150,000, and so did
Wow.
pretty well financially. And just on a mission to help others inspire and achieve the American dream.
Yeah, that's amazing. A great story, great backstory. Coming over to North America. Obviously, people know I'm in Canada, so I kind of refer to the two
Yep.
countries together simultaneously. We know they're separate countries, but coming over to the U.S. at that very formative age of 15 years old, and having that European background, and then living that or trying to live. Yeah, you just had a birthday very recently, and you just turned 24, and you just mentioned your net worth of 150K, which is amazing for someone your age. There's so many people so much older than you that don't have that type of investment. And so yeah, you're obviously setting yourself up for a very successful future.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. It wasn't always like that, right? It was. I think it ultimately comes down that being an immigrant played like a big role in the success because you come from zero, and so the sort of opportunities that you can get simply by working hard and going to university and going to get a good job and get good grades, and so I feel very grateful that I've had both sides of the coins, or I saw both sides of the coins, where I saw people struggle and people not have money and being always frugal. And I think part of that mentality kind of rolled over to me when I came here, and I wasn't like necessarily a big spender. When I was 16, my first job was at a frozen yogurt spot. And then when I was 17, I was at Steak and Shake, which is like a fast food joint place. I'm making like 8.25 an hour, and then slowly scaled. But in terms of the income, I was at $10 an hour, and then I had an internship paying me like $15 an hour, and then I had another internship paying like $28 an hour, and then since that it started scaling such that like I got to six figures 2 years after graduating the university. So it's not always been that, but I've always was able to like save money, invest. My major is accounting, right? So I had to take some personal finance classes. I had to take some accounting classes, some corporate finance classes. So I understood the compound interest and the time value of money and stuff like that. So I think that education played a big role in that, but also just being good with money and realizing the power of a dollar like early on, right?
Right.
That a dollar can turn into $24 in like 40 years with investing, right?
Yeah.
So are you willing to spend $1,000 on a new iPhone when in 40 years it can be 10,000? So the opportunity cost is just huge, and that's what I realized early on. And I can comfortably afford nicer car or something like that, right? But it's like, well, is it going to get me further along to my goal? And I'm sure at some point I will get the car upgraded, right? But it's like I just realized the opportunity cost is so big, and right now and especially since you're young, the more you invest, the more time it has to grow. And so the 20,000 you invest at such a young age can simply be like hundreds of thousands over time. And so that's why I'm prioritizing aggressively. it's sort of a lot of people are living in the mindset of today and now, right? And
Yeah.
they're not thinking that like 10 years down the line, you or 20 years down the line, you might have a retirement coming up or something like that, right? Or 30 years down the line. So not a lot of people are thinking in that long-term perspective. And they're saying their argument is like, well, something could happen tomorrow. Like, yes, sure, there is a chance that might happen, but what's the
Yeah.
probability of it, right? Like, what's the life expectancy? It's been consistently growing. So it's like that. It just realizing the power of money, and just I'm willing to take a few years of or 10 years of sacrifices, such that I can retire at 45, and then I can enjoy the hobbies. I can monetize my hobbies, right? Like I can live life on my own terms. So that's kind of the motivation behind the scenes.
Yeah, the mindset is incredible there to, exactly what you're doing by that mid-40s to be able to basically do what you wanna do, and you mentioned several great things, in there, the cars, obviously, I think I saw one of your tweets where growing up, you were like, I saw McLarens and
Yeah,
Lambos and thought that was, like and you were like, "My dream car was 4,000," and even that was a stretch.
yeah. It's in yeah. I've
$4,000, I should
the
say.
car. I mean, I have a McLaren back there, but that's one of the things is like I mentioned on Twitter or X, right? It's like I would look online and I see these cars, just like absolutely crazy cars, right? Because that's as a kid, like you're just watching like. I was playing like Need for Speed or something, right? Like just normal cars, and you see those types of cars, and and yes, cars is not a good investment, right? Obviously not an investment at all, but it's just money sink. But to me, it's a whole different level, because I was dreaming, like I said, about a $4,000 car, right? And the average salary is like $300, so there is not a lot to play on it. But now that I'm coming here and now I have 150,000 net worth, it's like I know that at some point I'll be able to feasibly buy that car, for example.
Right.
It might be 10, 15, 20 years down the line, right? But if I stay strategic with the investments and stuff like that, there will be an opportunity at some point. And it's just crazy because you would 20 years ago, like if I'm, let's say, 40 or something, 20 years ago or 25 years ago, I was just dreaming about something like that. And then the life can be at a point where I'll be able to afford it. And it just it goes to show that you don't necessarily know where life will take you. But as long as you stay consistent and try to improve yourself daily, and just try to work hard and try to improve your income, try to get a new certification, or try to somehow learn a new skill and monetize, especially like right now the social media impact, right? There have been TikTokers who've made millions. There have been YouTubers, and one thing that separates them is just working hard, creativity, and putting the time in.
Yeah, the
And
drive.
so it's the car aspect is just it will be more representation of that the dreams do actually come true if you actually put in the hard work. And it might take 10, 15 years, but if you're staying dedicated and 1% better every day, like it's possible to get there.
For sure. You are definitely a prime example, and we see it all the time, here in both Canada and the US of the immigrant success story, people coming here to North America and just working so hard, like, obviously you've done, going through school, getting the education, and gaining the knowledge, and then just putting knowledge to work for you, and, hats for your early age successes already, and where we definitely see you heading in the future, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I've also seen a lot of immigrants who do well. And I think one of the reasons is like we are able to realize how lucky we are to live in like a country of opportunities. So to give you a perspective, right? Like
Yeah,
you
and
can
just
go.
sorry to interrupt quickly. Those of
Yeah.
us born here, we truly do take it for granted, right? And that's the big difference. If we take it for granted, people like yourself come in and see just you don't take it for granted. You're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, and I think, and I was thinking about making a post similar to this, and I might in the future. Is like I'm just so like it's a big benefit to realize that we're just like fortunate enough to have that, and that's why I think the immigrant like immigrating can have like a big impact on you, because I don't think I would have worked as hard if I was in Ukraine. Like it's everyone speaks the same language, everyone is like I was still was getting good grades, right? But like just similar, like there is not that internal drive. But as you're coming to a new country, you and your family against the world, sort of to
Yeah,
say, and it's just like, so it's a much different drive and much and opportunity in terms of like I wanted to paint this picture for the listener is in Ukraine, for example, you can go to a 4-year university, right? Let's say you do like economics or accounting, right? um, Chances are you might not even find a job after you graduate. You might even become like a cashier or something, right? Like working at a store for minimum wage, even though you have bachelors. And there are actually stores that require you to have bachelors, right? So which is just mind blowing. So that
right.
country is more so like you need to be connected, you need to know the right people, bribes. It's difficult, right? But here, coming to the United States, I knew that hey, if I get good grades at the university and I graduate with a good GPA, there is no doubt that I'll get a good job, and that's what happened. I had a job a year before my graduation. I had a job lined up with Deloitte. So it's like, okay, well here the it flipped, because now you're like, I have a job lined up that pays good right after I graduate in my area of, without knowing anyone, without having any connections, without obviously no bribes or anything like that, because it's a little bit different country and stuff. But it just goes to show that here it's the area of opportunity. If you have good grades, if you present yourself in a respectful manner, and you just try to improve yourself and you get good grades, like I mentioned, like you can make it work. um,
Wow.
but yeah.
Now, before we started recording, you mentioned that when you moved here or when I say here, North America, at 15 years old, and that you knew next to no English or
Yeah,
little English.
very very little. My parents always emphasized education. When I was in Ukraine, we would have like English classes and stuff like that. So,
So you knew a little bit, but it wasn't. You
yeah,
couldn't like.
yeah, like I wasn't taking it as though like, hey, I need to actually know it because one day I might use it. No, it wasn't like that, because it all happened very quickly, very randomly. And so yeah, but the thing is I went to high school, and so I surrounded myself in an environment of English speaking teachers and students. Everyone was, so I was involved in that environment. I was also playing like soccer after school, so I was in that environment, and so I think that that's what allowed me to sort of scale my English and just like learn very quickly, because I was
Right.
in that environment, right? It's kind of similar to the quote that they're saying right now, that like your closest 5 friends will like determine who you become and stuff like that. So in that perspective, it was more like I was just surrounded by everyone speaking English, homeworks, right? Like you have to. It's and so that's kind of where it all came from.
Yeah. Well, hats off to you because you speak English extremely well now, and it's like literally been less than 10 years that you've been here in North America.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Dave.
obviously 10 years is more than enough time to learn a language. But yeah, I can
Yeah,
just
still
imagine
working
10 years
on
ago,
the
you probably
accent
would not have had the confidence to come on to a podcast and talk for 30, 40, 50 minutes.
yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you, Dave.
Let's get into uh, just some other like investing things
Yeah,
and sort of
for sure.
strategies. What do you like, dislike? Uh, any different companies? Sort of
Uh,
like open floor here. What do you
yeah.
want to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, what I dislike is people chasing high dividend companies. For me, when I started my investing journey, I was 18 years old, and I was buying companies that I've liked, like Apple and Amazon and different companies. But at the same time, I learned about dividend investing, right? And
Yep.
so your perspective changes a little bit, right? You go more into REITs, and you go into some of these companies that are paying 4 to 5% Verizon, AT&T and stuff like that. So I've I've was also buying those companies, and right now my investment strategy is very simple. I just buy ETFs. That's because so a lot of people are focusing on dividends, and I don't think it's incorrect. I don't. There is no right strategy. Yes, exactly. Well, that's why we're in this podcast. But I don't think there is an incorrect strategy. There is a dividend, there is growth, there's value, right? There's so many different strategies.
Yeah.
Ultimately, my message is whatever you're gonna stick with long term is the correct strategy for you. Um, because and the reason I say that, right? If getting $100 per month in dividends is gonna get you motivated to invest more long term, you're going to do much better than someone who invests in VTI or VU or any Vanguard index funds, S&P 500, simply because they've just put in 2x the capital, right? Obviously, as long as you're still buying quality assets like SCHD, let's say, right, as long as you're still buying a quality asset, if it gets you motivated more than the other person, you're going to put in 2x the amount, let's say, and over time, even though the other one might have a little bit higher percentage, like VU might have a 1% extra total return, or 2 or 3%, you're still going to get much more ahead simply because you've put in the 2x. So my thought is, okay, if you're motivated by one number, right, like whatever the investment value is, like if you invest in VU, right, if that gets you motivated and you're able to 2x the number of investment, or put into twice as much as you would have otherwise if you chose a different strategy, then hats off to you. I don't think there's necessarily a right strategy. The right strategy is the one that you can commit to long term, and the one you can be motivated by in the long term. So that's my perspective. But in terms of the actual allocation of capital, I've had a challenge for the SCHD. I don't know if you remember, but it was for every like I'm gonna buy a share of SCHD, and so I have stayed committed to that, and I've acquired 30,000 already up to date in SCHD.
How many shares is that? That's got to be a lot.
It's like three, four. I think I'm at like three something, 300 something, or four. I think it was 400 something. But so I am committed to that, and I've been posting updates every single whenever I buy it. So, but after that journey is done, I'm actually expecting almost like 200 something in dividend from SEHD alone in September, and so that's kind of just a nice paycheck. But so my allocation is going to shift after I finish with that journey towards some growth companies like VGT, Vanguard Growth Technology, a fund, and then maybe a little bit of VTI or VU. So I'm just my message is like ETFs and whatever works for you. That's kind of how I look into it.
I absolutely love what you said there. Is it the best strategy is the strategy that works for you, whether it's the dividend strategy, the total growth strategy, value investing, whatever you can commit to long term. And I'm kind of paraphrasing your words here, but sort of what you said is whatever you can commit to long term and what is going to work for you is the best investing strategy for you. And I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more with that. And you mentioned a lot of different ETFs and index funds. I don't know which ones are which, but
Mhm.
you mentioned VU and obviously SCHD is one of the most popular ones
Yeah.
in the Twitter/X community. So and I get that strategy too of like, hey, ETFs and chill, as the saying
Yeah.
goes,
I
right?
mean,
ETFs and chill
um,
because you just get this nice basket of whether it's 15, 30, 100 different
yeah.
companies all in this ETF, right?
Yeah, and for me personally, I don't have the time to research the companies. Like, I don't. I just don't have that time allocation. It takes a lot of effort, I feel like, to choose the right companies, because you also consistently have to monitor their performance, right? Like there can be some investment that the company does, and they change the CEO and they change the route, like Disney, right? You start getting more into politics instead of focusing on shareholder value, instead of focusing on maximizing returns. You start choosing sides. So you need to be constantly monitoring your investments, and that's why my idea is I can just ETFs and chill and let the fund managers get their 0.01% expense ratio or something, and let them do all the work. And I think that's fairly worth it in the long term.
Yeah, and so many there's so many people like yourself. Actually, just I've had a few very recent guests sort of with the exact same strategy of just ETF and chill. Let that money manager make that little tiny percentage. Let them do the work, and at the end of the day, you can sleep well at night. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
You're not
right.
researching 100 different companies.
Yeah, and if the stock dropped 10%, chances are I would see almost no impact of that, right? How there were what was that company that recently just had like a 20% stock drop? Some retailer. I can't. There was some retailer that had like a 20% drop in stock, right? Simply because Dick's. I think it was Dick's.
Dick's Sporting Goods.
Yeah, right. Because of theft and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, great. Like, I don't care. Right? If another company drop, I don't care. As long as, I'm sure you might see a 0 point, depending on their allocation, if they even have allocation in that. Like you might see very, very little impact. And then also, I made recently a post saying that, a lot of there have been a lot of posts like, $1,000 invested in Amazon in 1995 is like 150,000 right now. And I disagree with those posts simply because they try to tell people to find the winning companies, right? Like
Yeah.
chances are, if you bought Amazon in 1995, in 2008 or dot-com bubble, you would have sold it at a loss, and you would have been saying Amazon is dead, right? The reason we know Amazon is so big right now is simply because of how they were able to scale, and how they've been able to focus on their customers, and how they back then Amazon was just, what is it, a bookstore, right? Online bookstore. And I'm sure they had probably more various different channels added at
Yeah.
that point. But it's like, don't try to find a new company. Like, yes, maybe you will get, but at the end of the day, just focus on. I mean, you can buy Amazon now, right? This is not a financial advice, obviously, but don't try to find a winning company, right? Because so many people will be like, I can try to find an Amazon, right, and buy some penny stocks for $1 too, or penny actual penny stocks. But
Hmm.
it's like, just you. Chances are you're gonna probably lose your money. So just focus on ETFs. That's the best advice for any like investor starting out.
Yeah, definitely. And I absolutely love what you said there. And the same could be said about Microsoft and Apple, where,
Yeah,
oh, I
like
wish
all
I had
those
bought
big tech companies.
Microsoft in 1988 or Apple in 1982. And same thing, you would have sold it sometime in the 90s or early 2000s, and you'd be really no further ahead today. Hats off to anybody that did buy Apple or Microsoft in the 80s and still
Right?
hold it to this day, 40 years later, right? So,
Yeah,
but I can guarantee you those people are few and far between.
yeah, absolutely, right. And I even stock options, right? Like the people who were actual employees of Apple, I'm sure only a small amount of them actually held through. Um, right? I mean, they were at a point where they were, doing very bad financially and stuff like that, and they
Yeah.
had to innovate. And so it's like, I've actually worked for a Fortune 500 company who was struggling for cash, and who's the technology recently, the tech market, right, it like dropped. So I was working for one of those company, right? And it's not fun when a company is losing 100 million a month. That's how much the company I was working for was losing at that time. They were focusing on real estate technology and stuff like that. But so since then I switched to a different company to be in a more stable industry. But it's like, a company is losing 100 million a month,
That's
right?
that's a
How
lot
many?
of money.
Exactly, that's a lot of money, right? So how many?
And it's not
And I'm not.
sustainable for very long, no matter how big the company
Yeah,
is, right?
yeah. I mean, you have a billion in cash, right? So 10 months, right? If the pace continues. So It's like how many, and I'm not necessarily saying that that was happening to Apple, but it's like they had some losses at some point, and so it's like how many actually held through. Like I
Yeah.
quit, right? Like I didn't even invest my stock options. I was like, you know what, this is not. I don't want to be getting fired or this or that, right? So like how many actually held through? Probably very low amount of people.
Yeah. I think that's an incredible point that you made. And obviously with Apple too, obviously the big turnaround in the early to mid 2000s, first the iPod and like, the music, which nobody even has
Oh
an iPod anymore because now you just have music on
yeah,
your phone or whatever else. And then obviously the iPhone came along and pretty much destroyed BlackBerry, and that was the big disruptor, right? BlackBerry was the biggest phone for the longest time, and then it became
yeah,
Apple. And obviously now, like, actually, I'm on Android. I prefer Android to Apple, but that's just my personal opinion. And I
yeah.
definitely get why people love Apples. They are great products.
They are, yeah, and I mean, I use some of their products, and it's like the brand is very strong, and I think that's the. I think I've recently read a study that I think have the highest brand equity. They're the number one company with their brand equity, regardless what they drop. They're gonna receive revenue,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be significant, right? Regardless of the product they create, regardless of anything, and
Regardless of how similar the iPhone 15 is to the
yeah,
14, it's
right.
the same damn phone, but people
Yeah,
are gonna
if
like
it's
line up around the block at midnight to buy it.
yeah, if it's 1 gram lighter or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, their brand equity is definitely strong, and they're starting to diversify. They're being smart about it. So not a financial advice to buy Apple, but who knows what's going to happen in 20, 30 years.
Right.
But they're playing it smart. They're trying to diversify into all the other like Apple TV products, and they're going in subscription model and then servicing. And I think
And that
they're
VR
gonna
headset looks
yeah.
awesome too,
Yeah,
right?
like a $3,000, and
Yeah.
hey, you have a credit card debt. Let's not spend 3,000 on a VR headset. I don't think that would be the smartest decision.
Right.
But yeah, it's like don't choose these companies simply because you believe like, and there's so many people that do that nowadays. They choose like some pharmaceutical companies that have claimed that their research is gonna cure cancer or something like that. Yes, there might be one in the future. Yes, and but the
And
chances
it would
are
be
that's the
incredible
one
if
you
someone
chose
did
is
if they did cure cancer, that would be
right.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, and but it's like, or any other AI nowadays, right? Technology companies, like chances are it's it might not play out as well as we hope to. So
Yeah. So the reason I mentioned BlackBerry there is because I've said this many times in the past is I really do foresee that happening, kind of history repeating itself with the iPhone. Something's going to come along someday. I don't know what it's going to be, when it's going to be, but there's going to be some disruptor company or something come along, and we don't know what it is because right now smartphones are incredible, right? Like you have everything on your smartphone, your apps, your calculator, your absolutely everything is on your smartphone.
yeah,
So who knows what innovative company can come along and then add to that. But I just see that happening because Apple came and did it to BlackBerry. So in my
someone might
opinion,
do it to them. Yeah,
that's
and
that's exactly my opinion, right? Somebody's going to
yeah,
come along and do
and
the exact same thing to Apple. So
And here's the thing. When Apple came out with that, it was just something not imaginable, right? Like you couldn't imagine that something like that is going to come out at some point, right? Or even before the phones, right? Like you didn't think that something like that was feasible. So
yeah,
right now we might also be thinking, well, what's going to disrupt the iPhone, right? Or what's going to disrupt our phone? There might be something that we are not even thinking about, or
yeah,
most people are not thinking about. Sure, maybe there are already people working on that. We're just not aware of it yet. But it's interesting because no one thought that that's gonna be feasible or possible, but it actually happened. So that's why I choose ETFs, right? I'm gonna let the fund managers analyze their position. I'm gonna let them do the research. I'm going to let them analyze the sales. I'm going to let them analyze the ratios. I'm going to let them analyze the growth
you
over
let
next.
them do all the work, and
I'm
I'll get
Yeah,
paid.
I'm just gonna collect the dividend and capital appreciation and stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome. With that said, so obviously, your strategy is ETF and chill. Well, I love that saying because
Yeah,
what exactly you just summed it up. Let them do all the work, let them take care of everything. With that said, do you still own some
Yeah,
individual
I
companies?
still own some since I was 18. When I initially started investing, I still have the same stocks, and it's like some Visa and Broadcom and like some other like Cisco. I think I have a few. I don't really want to sell them. I'm just keeping them. I might in the future just allocate some more capital towards ETFs, but I would say by weight, about 90%. I want to say about 90, maybe 95 even percent is in ETFs. And that ratio will only by weight is only going to keep increasing since I haven't bought like an actual individual stock in the past couple of years. But who knows? Maybe um, that will change someday when I start picking stocks. No, or maybe that will change if I have enough time on my hand. If I wanna, actually do a DD about a stock, right? Like actually do
Right.
some in-depth analysis, like look into their or stay on earnings calls, right? And listen to the questions the analysts are asking, and follow people on social media and pay more closer attention. Maybe that will change at some point. But currently, with my 9 to 5 and other things I've got going on, just is not feasible. And I mean, sure, I can buy it, but it wouldn't be the right decision for me because I want to know what I'm buying, right? And even
Right.
on this podcast, right, we talk about SCHD or VTI. Like people need to still understand what they are, and I think that's an important lesson because right now we've came to the area of social media where someone can just buy a stock simply because I said that I bought 50 shares of it, right? Like there are people
Yeah.
who just follow what you do, and I would still encourage people to just understand the basics. So like what are the main holdings of that ETF or index fund, right? Or why is it increasing? What are the underlying holdings? Stuff like that, just the basics. Understanding that will
Definitely.
go.
I would say for sure, like if using SEHD as an example,
Yeah,
I'm not sure how many total companies they have within that basket, but you need to know the top, I would say, at least companies in that fund, right? To
yeah,
set
just
entities to know, hey, I think Coca Cola's in there, McDonald's, Home Depot. Like I don't know
yeah,
what the top 10 are myself, but if I were to invest in that company, that's easily the first thing I would do is just find out what are the top 10 companies in there, and and like I said, they're probably those types of companies like the Coca-Colas, McDonald's, Home Depots, etcetera, and you're like, "Oh, okay, that's" again, goes back to the sleep well at night and put your mind at ease that, okay, these companies are solid, they're not going anywhere, and then again, going back to your point, it's an index fund or ETF where if they do start to tank, well, they're gonna get
yeah,
replaced by another company within that in the fund, right?
yeah. And another thing that I've recently actually made a post about it is to make sure people actually do understanding between different funds and how they overlap and what's the holdings by weight, meaning
Yeah.
overlap by weight, right? Because you might think like, hey, I'm gonna buy this ETF, and then you're like, well, I'm gonna diversify 50-50 into this ETF and this ETF, right? If you
And then
chose
you find
a
out that other
VTI
ETF
and a
also
VU.
has Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and Home Depot, and you're like,
Exactly.
I'm not
Yeah,
diversified at all
exactly,
because
right.
I'm buying the same companies in these 2 different in these 2
Yeah.
different funds.
um, and like VTI and VU, for example, let's take the total index, like the two Vanguard funds, right? Their overlap by weight is 85%, and 99% holdings of VU are also in VTI.
Right.
So it's like if you're just buying those two funds, I mean, you're probably going to be diversified well enough in terms of their S&P 500, they're good index funds, right? But you might be underselling yourself on like a technology fund, right? That in 2023 the tech companies were the one that like pumped up a lot, right? So
Right.
you might have missed on a few additional percentages of but so all I'm trying to say is like make sure you actually understand the overlap, and there are so many resources online that you can just type in the ticker number of VTI, and then the ticker number of VU, and then just compare and see how it is, how are the holdings looking like, and to make sure you're also protecting yourself in terms of appreciation, as well as diversifying your risk if something goes down.
So you've talked so far all about the United States of America, all American companies, all American ETFs and
Mm-hmm.
funds. With your European background, do you look outside of the United States at all for any companies
Honestly,
or any
no.
opportunities? You're like, no.
No. And maybe that will change in the future, but I, knowing where I came from, I do genuinely believe that maybe in the future, as I get a little bit older, I might look into diversifying internationally. But right now, I think that the United States companies is like the Fortune 500, the biggest companies. Like that's what I want to. And here's the thing, right? Most of these companies have international presence, right?
Right.
Coca. I was just drinking Coca-Cola in Ukraine just as much as, I mean, I don't do it anymore, but I was drinking it in Ukraine and here, right? So even if
Yeah.
you're in, I'm investing in, through an ETF into Apple, right? Like my friends from Ukraine have, some Apple phones, a few of them, right? So it's like these companies have international exposure, right? So
There's McDonald's in almost every
I
country
know,
in the world,
right?
right?
Or Starbucks in a lot of the countries, Asia, right? They're
Yeah.
have a very big presence in there. So I'm like,
It's like literally there's three countries that they're not. They're North Korea, Cuba, and Russia, and the rest of it pretty well the other 194
yeah.
countries you have McDonald's, Starbucks, Coca-Cola,
So
right?
that's why I believe that you're diversified enough such that these companies they provide you with that. But at the same time, the economic conditions in Europe they're a little bit kind of funky, and I know the inflation. But I mean, a lot of countries have been getting high interest rates and stuff like that. Canada, and U.S. and
Yeah.
Finland and Denmark and like all of those European countries, they're also experiencing exactly what we have experiencing. So I'll just stick to the Fortune 500, these companies, and get the international exposure like indirectly. But might switch in the future as they do more research about it. As we know, India and China and stuff like that, they're projecting to increase their GDP significantly. So who knows? Might be good to have that exposure.
I love that answer that, hey, listen, I'm investing in just basically these American companies, whether it's directly or through an ETF, but there's global diversification because these companies are worldwide. So
Yeah,
I love that
and
answer.
and who knows, right? If you invested in like a China specific fund or something, because of the, what is it, Everest, or the company, right? The major real estate company in there that like is going down because they're not able to pay. Like, I don't know how
Evergrande, is
well.
that the one you're thinking of?
I'm sorry.
Evergrande?
Yeah, yeah, one of those, right? Whatever it's called. It's like, is how well do those funds actually perform? I haven't looked at the international funds. I know there is one Vanguard International Fund. I actually don't think it has a good performance over the past 5 years. I think it's like maybe 10%, or I don't
Right.
have the, but I think it's significantly lower than something like a VTI or VU. So who knows what's going to happen in the future. But right now, I'm just sticking with those and might research later.
I'm gonna quickly ask you, and just because I have to, any knowledge of the Canadian market, Canadian companies,
No,
Canadian banks in particular?
I know that Canadian banks pay very good dividends, very high dividends. That's as much, and that's as much as Montreal Bank, I think, pays like a
Bank of
lot.
Montreal, yeah.
Yeah, they pay not a lot. All I know is accountants get much less salary in the Canada versus United States, and that's one thing I know people complain about. And I do know that the housing market is extremely, extremely expensive. So that's the two facts that I have, but I'm definitely willing to learn more.
Okay, sounds good, yeah. Yeah, the Canadian banks, it's more about the longevity of the dividend. Bank of Montreal, like you mentioned, been paying a dividend since, I believe it's 1829. Bank of Nova Scotia since 1832 or 33. And Canada didn't even become a country until 1867, so it's kinda like, wow, these banks were paying
Yeah,
dividends for 40 plus years before Canada was even a country, so,
yeah,
um, yeah, definitely, something that we talk about a lot here on the Passive Income Podcast are the Canadian banks and several, other of the strong Canadian companies, but I just kinda wanted to quickly get that in there because I figured well, I know you've seen tweets about them on or posts about them on
yeah.
X, and so, yeah.
Mm.
Uh, I am now speaking of X, the app formerly known as Twitter. Here is how to find the Money Cruncher, and we're gonna talk actually. So yeah, at Money Cruncher at Money underscore Cruncher, and I know you wanted to talk about this, the Zero Debt Blueprint.
Yeah. That's a book I've recently actually launched. There are so many Americans, and I'm sure that's the case in Canada too, right? That they're
Definitely,
struggling with that. And I'm talking specifically more about consumer debt. I'm not necessarily talking about the good debt. I believe
yeah.
that there is a good distinction between those two. And so I think leverage can be good to grow your net worth. But most people struggle with consumer debt. They have credit card debt, like I mentioned in that post, like 20,000 on average in consumer
Yeah,
debt.
just let me quickly read this. The average American's personal debt is 21,800. Why? Because they lack the knowledge and support needed to pay it off. My zero debt blueprint will help with that. It's free, $99 value. Just like and comment.
Yep.
Debt must be following. So, get yourself a copy of the zero debt blueprint.
Yeah, and I've spent about close to 100 hours, and I talk about that in the book researching. There, I've created two spreadsheets actually within the book for people to input their own data. Look into different investing strategies, or sorry, different payoff strategies like the avalanche and the snowball strategies.
Yep.
See how fast one versus the other one is going to get them there. See, obviously the economic theory says that avalanche is the best one because you're paying off the high interest debt first, right? So if you have a 10%, let's say 20% credit card debt and 10%, student loan or something, it makes sense to pay off the 20% because he'll pay less in interest. But human beings are actually irrational, right? Like we don't make the best decision for us, and that's why there is a field called behavioral economics, right? Like that's an actual thing. Like we know that 401k match is free money, but some people choose not to do that, right? Not to invest because and anyways, it allows people to understand different strategies, right? Like the snowball method, right? The big thing for them is like if you pay off the card with the smallest balance first, you might get more motivated to increase and pay off the second one and the third and the fourth. You kind of like it's a mental win. So I created a spreadsheet there for people to input your own debt and compare one strategy versus the other. How much interest are you going to get anyway? So it's like I've spent so much time just trying to invest my time, and I've learned some books. I've studied books. I've did some research. I've actually asked a guy who paid off 120,000 in consumer loans to provide
Oh,
some tips, and so the book includes that some of the strategies of his. I talked about balance transfer. I talked about loan consolidations. I talk about behavioral economics, like certain things like that buy now, pay later companies do nowadays. So if anyone is struggling with that, I definitely recommend just sending me a DM or messaging that under the book, and I can like send you a free copy, or we can actually even post a link under the in the description or something.
yeah, oh,
So
definitely the link will
um,
be in the description below, so,
yeah,
um
so for anyone, it's free. It's no cost. I just want
which was
I
my next
motivate.
question, why is it free? Why
Yeah,
aren't you like,
exactly.
at least selling it for 99 cents or something, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I've actually answered that question in the preface right away. And the reason why it's free is sort of two things. One, I believe that financial freedom comes from not having any consumer loans. Like that's the best way to start building your financial freedom. Start investing is by not having any consumer loans, right? Because consumer loans are actually guaranteed returns, and that's something is guaranteed. So that's why I recommend people paying off the high interest loans as the first step. And the reason why it's free is like I see so many money coaches like charging people to help them get out of debt, right? That's already like counterintuitive, meaning you're charging
Yeah.
someone to help them get out of debt, right? And so one of the
They're
purposes is
already
like,
in debt. They don't need to be paying more money for anything else.
yeah, and so one is like I just don't feel good charging someone for that. And then the second promise is, once you get out of that, there's budgeting, and there's investing, and there's taxes. And like I'm a CPA by nature, so perhaps in the future you might need someone who would like to assist you with that. And so the premise was to make the book as best as it can be, to provide as much value as I can in case, to help you get out of that at no cost. And then eventually, if once you get out of it and you want to create a personalized strategy that can help you grow investments, or if you wanted to consult someone about something, I'm there for it. So
Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, definitely send Money Cruncher a message there on X, the app formerly known as Twitter, if you are struggling with debt. And it definitely sounds like that book is 110% step in the right direction to help you with that debt. And there, you said it too. You know, hammer you nailed it on the head of just like tons of Americans, and same here in Canada. So many Canadians struggling with debt, and it's a massive weight on your shoulders, right? And so if
yeah, and in the book I talk a little bit about the actual health impact of having that, right?
the
Like
mental
you're
health part of
constantly
it,
worried
right?
about it.
The
You're
mental
constantly
health is
thinking
like
about mental
'cause
health
I can
and
speak to this
physical
because I've been there. Like, luckily nowadays I'm pretty good. I just carry a mortgage. I pay off my credit card every month, and that's the
yeah.
only debt. But I've been there in the past, and it's tough mentally.
Yeah, mentally and physically, actually. It talked a little bit about the increased chances of hypertension in there. In the book, I've quoted some research actually to talk a little bit about that. And so that's why I feel like, it's the right step in the towards, getting yourself debt free. Just it's great in terms of, the bad debt, the consumer loans and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Mortgage is a different story. But I agree. It's like no one should be living through that, and there's so much support and there's so much education nowadays around that. And I talk a little bit about the support aspect in the book too. So it's definitely, I've spent so much time on it, like close to 2 months. I was studying other books. I was consulting other people. I had some people review the book, and I've been getting very positive feedback over the past 1 week about it. So
Awesome.
I definitely think that people, by reading it, you're putting yourself, in a good spot.
In a
By
better position.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, this has been absolutely amazing. I know we're gonna keep talking for a few more minutes here because I have a couple more thoughts that I
Yeah,
wanna get your input about. First, again, just recently turned 24, and you are definitely on the right path. And so many other who I call the young guns, the other young adults who I've had here on the Passive Income podcast that are just doing incredible things for themselves because setting them up within the community, and they sort of see that long-term investing strategy. But my thought process here is, what would you say to the other 99% of 23, 24, 25 year olds who are out at the bar every night, or not every night, every Friday night, Saturday night, um not thinking
yeah.
about invest well, like, how do you talk to those people?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because I genuinely believe that those people, they don't really understand the power of a dollar or the power of your money right now.
The power of
That's
compounding that
Yes,
dollar.
power of compounding and power of money, right? I just generally believe that those people don't understand it, because if they did, they would make different choices, and I genuinely believe in that. And it's rough, right? Knowing that like you're investing in for your future, but for me, like I previously mentioned, is like 10, 15 years of sacrifices is worth so much more than working at 65 trying
Yeah.
to just survive, right? Because your social security benefits or whatever the benefits you're getting from the government is just not enough. So to me, I would hate to be in a position of having to work that. So, and I'm sure those people in the bars, they will realize that eventually. I just hope
Yeah,
it's not too late when
yeah,
they're
when they're 35, 40. And here's
yeah.
another point I wanna make to you is, like, right now at 24, you think 40 is kind of I know you do, and it's not wrong, but you think 40, 45 is sort of older, right? But from a perspective of someone who's well past 40, is that 40 is actually still very young. Again, you're
Yeah.
on
It,
that journey of, in that 15 to 20 years of sacrifice to get from, say, let's say 24 to 44. 44 is still very young. That's
yeah.
still 20 more years to
But
64, 30 more years to 74,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah. And for me, it's like I want to spend time with my future family, my kids. I want to spend time doing the thing. I don't want to miss out on their soccer games. I don't want to miss out. That's why one of my motivation is like I just want to work hard right now, so I don't have to worry about those things. And I would, maybe I'll be, teaching in college, twice a week or something, right? Like
Right.
I will just be able to do the things that I actually enjoy instead of like kind of slaving away somewhere. And I think most people will realize that eventually. And I think slowly a lot of people are talking about that, the freedom, the big thing.
The
And
time
who knows
freedom.
what's actually going to happen, right? Some people who are retired, they might struggle and they might want to go back to work. But I genuinely believe if people are given the option of not having to work, they would choose not to. So the people are saying that they love their job. I actually do love my job, but if I was given a chance to not work on it, I would take it, right?
Yeah.
So just the sacrifices and realizing the power of money right now and how it can set you up for the success in the future. I think that a lot of those 24, 25 years old, they're not understanding. And to me, I'm glad I had that financial background. I studied accounting and I had a personal finance class in high school, actually in America, right? That talked about credit cards and banking and investing and stuff like that. So I do think that it's lack of
Which is rare,
education.
right? Which is
Yeah, it
rare to
is
have a high
rare.
school
A
course
lot
about
of a
that.
lot of influencers do the money influencers. They talk about having a high school personal finance class, and I've actually had one, and it was incredible. And perhaps that's also one of the reasons that I value those things.
Yeah, for sure. Again, awesome. This has been an absolutely incredible conversation. I thank you so much for your time. Before we
Definitely.
sign off, before we leave it, just any parting thoughts, any final words?
Thank you, Dave, for inviting me. And just people, stop spending your money on stupid stuff. That's how you do it. If you want
Stop
to get
spending your
us,
money on stupid stuff. We need to get that on a T-shirt.
yeah, actually, I was like, one of my posts was like, "Stop spending money on stupid shit,"
Yeah.
So, that hits. But seriously, I think it generally comes down to prioritization and just over consumerism. Like, do you really need those, $350 sneakers or something? Like, I mean, that's just
Or
my
yeah, a
opinion. Or do you
$20
need to
pair of shoes
upgrade
from
your
Walmart,
iPhone?
right?
Yeah, or like, do you need to upgrade? Like, sure, get your $60 sneakers. That's what I buy. $70. And they last me forever. And or do you really need to upgrade your iPhone every time the 15th or 14th coming out, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I think it ultimately comes down to prioritization and just people spending money on stupid stuff, and they're not realizing the power of if they invested that money instead, the power of opportunity cost.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for your time. I truly appreciated having you here. This has been an incredible conversation. Definitely find the Money Cruncher on X, the app formerly known as Twitter, at money_cruncher. If you are still here listening and watching well over 50 some minutes, hit subscribe.